The Second Voyage of Sinbad the Sailor. 1,001 Nights. For some time, after my return to Baghdad, I continued to live joyful and carefree life. But it was not long before I felt an irresistible longing to travel again about the world and to visit distant cities and islands to quest of profit and adventure. So I bought a great store of merchandise, and after making preparation for departure, sailed down the Tigris and Basra. There I embarked, together with a band of merchants, in a new vessel, well equipped and manned by a sturdy crew, which set up the same day. Aided by a favorable wind, we voyaged for many days and nights from port to port and from island to island, selling and bartering our goods and haggling with merchants and officials wherever we cast anchor. Any length destiny carried our ship to the shores of an uninhabited island, full in fruit and flowers, jubilant with the singing of birds and murmur of crystal streams. Her passengers and crew went ashore, and we all set off to enjoy the delights of the island. I strolled through the green meadows, leaving my companions far behind, and sat down in a shady thicket to eat a simple meal by a spring of water, lulled by the soft and fragrant breeze which blew around me. I lay up on the grass and presently fell asleep. I cannot tell how long I slept, but when I awoke, I saw none of my fellow travelers and soon realized that the ship had sailed away without anyone noticing my absence. I ran in frantic haste towards the sea, and on reaching the shore saw the vessel, a white speck upon the vast blue ocean, dissolving into the far horizon. I cursed the day I bade farewell to the joys of a contented life and bitterly repented on my folly in venturing again upon the hazards and hardships of the sea. After having so narrowly escaped death in my first voyage. After he could see nothing but the boundless ocean, he climbed down the tree. He found out a gigantic bird with enormous wings. As it flew through the air, screened the sun and hid it from the island. The sight of this prodigy instantly called to my mind a story I had heard in my youth from pilgrims and adventurers, and realized that the white dome was no other than the rock's egg. Rising swiftly, I unwound my turban from my head, then doubled it and twisted it into a rope, with which I securely bound myself by the waist to one of the great talons of the monster. Perchance this bird, I thought, will carry me away to a civilized land. Wherever I am sit down, it will surely be better than a solitary island. I lay awake all night, fearing to close my eyes, lest the bird should fly away with me while I sleep. I clung fast to its talons as it winged its flight through the void and soared higher and higher until it almost touched the heavens. After some time, it began to drop, and sailing swiftly downwards, came to earth on the brow of a steep hill. I hastened to untie my turban before the rock became aware of my presence. When I had made my way down the hill, I marveled to see the ground thickly covered with the rarest diamond, so that the entire valley blazed with a glorious light. Overwhelmed with horror and oblivious of hunger and fatigue, I roamed the valley all day, searching with infinite caution for a shelter where I might pass the night. And thus, I came upon a narrow-mouthed cave into which I crawled, blocking its entrance from within by a great stone. I thought to myself, "Here I shall be safe tonight. When tomorrow's come, let destiny do its worst." Scarcely had I advanced a few steps when I saw at the far end of the cave an enormous serpent coil in a great knot around its eggs. My hair stood on end, and I was transfixed with terror, seeing no way of escape. However, I put my trust in Allah and kept vigil all night. At daybreak, I rolled back the stone and staggered out of the cave, reeling like a drunken man. There is a story I had heard from travelers who had visited the Diamond Mountains. At midday, rocks and mighty vultures would swoop down upon Mutton and carry it away their talons to their nest in the mountain heights. With a great clamor, the merchants would then rush at the birds and force them to drop the meat and fly away, after which it would only remain to look through the carcasses and pick out the diamonds. As I recall this story, a plan of escape formed in my mind. I selected a great quantity of priceless stones and hid them all about me, filling my pockets with them and pressing them into the folds of my belt and garments. Then I unrolled my turban, stuffed it with more diamonds, twisted it into a rope as I had done before, and lying down below the carcass, bound it firmly to my chest. I had not remained long in that position when I suddenly felt myself lifted from the ground by the talon of a huge vulture which had tightly closed upon the meat. The bird climbed higher and higher and finally alighted up on the top of a mountain. As soon as it began to tear at the flesh, there arose from behind the neighboring rocks a great tumult, at which the bird took fright and flew away. At once I freed myself and sprang to my feet with face and clothes all bloody. I saw a man come running to the spot and stop, and alarmed as he saw me. Without uttering a word, he cautiously bent over the carcass to examine it, eyeing me suspiciously all the while. But, finding no diamonds, he wrung his hands and lifted his arms, crying, "O heavenless Allah, in whom alone dwell all power and majesty, defend us from the wiles of the evil one." Before I could explain my presence, the man, shaking with fear, turned to me and asked, "Who are you, and how come you are here?" "Do not be alarmed, sir," I replied. "I am no evil spirit, but an honest man, a merchant by profession. My story is an extraordinary one, and the adventure which has brought me to this mountain surpasses in wonder all the marvels that men have seen or heard of. But first, pray accept some of these diamonds, which I myself gathered in the fertile valley below." The owner of the bait was overjoyed at the unexpected gift. He warmly thanked me and called down blessings upon me. Whilst we were thus talking, several other merchants came up from the mountainside. They crowded round us, listening in amazement to my story, and congratulated me, saying, "By Allah, your escape was a miracle. For no man has ever set foot in that valley and returned alive. Allah alone be praised for your salvation." The merchants gave me food and drink, and there I slept soundly for many hours. Then after a short voyage, we arrived in a pleasant, densely wooded island, covered with trees so huge that beneath one of them 100 men could shelter from the sun. It is from these trees that the aromatic substance known as camphor is extracted. The trunks are hollowed out, and the supposes drop by drop, and two vessels which are placed beneath, soon curdling into a crystal gum. In that island, I saw gigantic beasts called the carcadon or rhinoceros, which grazes in the fields like a cow or buffalo. Taller than a camel, it has a single horn in the middle of forehead, and upon his horn, nature has carved the likeness of a man. The carcadon attacks the elephant, impaling it upon the victim dies. Before long, however, the elephant's fat melts in the heat of the sun and dripping down into the carcadon's eyes, puts out sight, so that the beast blunders helplessly alone and finally drops dead. Then the rook swoops down upon both animals and carries them off to its nest in the high mountains. I also saw many strange breeds of buffalo in that island. I sold a part of my diamonds for a large sum and exchanged more for a vast quantity of merchandise. Then we set sail and trading from port to port and from island to island. At length arrived safely in Basra. After a few days sojourn there, I set out upstream to Baghdad, the city of peace, loaded with precious goods and the finest of my diamonds. I hastened to my old street and entering my own house, rejoiced to see my friends and kinsfolk. I gave them a gold and presents and distributed alms among the poor of the city. I soon forget the perils and hardships of my travels and talk again to sumptuous living. I ate well, dressed well, and kept open house for innumerable gallants and boon companions. From far and near men came to hear me speak of my adventures and to learn the news of foreign lands from me. All were astounded at the dangers I had escaped and wished me joy of my return. Such was my second voyage. Tomorrow, my friends, if Allah will, I shall relate to you the extraordinary tale of my third voyage. The famous mariner ended. The guests marveled at his story. When the evening feast was over, Sinbad the sailor gave Sinbad the porter 100 pieces of gold, which he took with thanks and many blessings, and departed, lost in wonderment at all he had heard. The end.
Good day, everyone. These are the characters of a story, 1001 Night, a tale from Arabian Nights. So the characters here is Shahrazad, a girl who has been condemned to die by her cruel husband, and she is a wife of Sultan Shahryar. Sultan Shahryar, a cruel king and a husband of Shahrazad. Sinbad the merchant, who gave 100 pieces of gold to Sinbad the porter. Sinbad the porter is the owner of the bait and who received an expected gift from Sinbad the merchant. So the merchants who gave the food because of what he received from Sinbad sailor. So that is all the characters of the story.
Hello everyone. For the setting, The Thousand of One Nights, also known as the Arabian Nights, or Alf Layla wa Layla in Arabic, is a collection of stories from unknown dates and authors taking place largely in the Middle East. So the range of locations of the stories are India, Iran, and Egypt. So this indicates that the tales come from multiple authors. A frame narrative set in India and Indochina in the legendary past links a series of inner tales from Persia, Arabia, and China. In circulation since the 9th century, transcribed into Arabic in a 13th century version that survives in the 14th century Syrian manuscript of Alf Layla wa Layla, or the 1001 Nights. So the setting for Arabian Nights is in the Middle East. Specifically, it takes place in the tents of the Sultan. The region where the 1001 Nights originated as oral tales have traveled the world repeatedly over the centuries. But this region is where they originated, first told by storytellers in the 600s and 900s CE in Iran, Saudi Arabia, and India.
The plot in the story entitled 1001 Nights, a Tale from Arabian Nights. The primary story is about Shahryar, and the Shahryar discovers that his queen at the beginning of the tale is being unfaithful. He declares that all women are the same and vows to take a new bride each night and have her killed the next morning. Very simply put, the frame story itself is one of a king, King Shahryar, who has been betrayed by his wife and who is off commercing with his brothers, King Shah Zaman, who had suffered a similar fate himself. On their journey, he encountered a beautiful woman who's being held captive by most fearsome genii. The next day, the grooms lead the horses of the king's son to drink at the water hole. None of the horses king's son, and together retreated, scared, deleted Rosal, and puffing violently because they saw something shiny and throwing sparks into the water bottom. And the grooms made them back into the water, whistling strongly, through without convincing as animals pulling the rope reasoning and spinning. Then the Grumps recorded through and discovered the diamond's bracelet should drop her ankle Yam feet but were too large for the narrowness of the object, and after 15 days in vain investigations and trials, they came home from the three sisters and gave a loud cry of joy to say that conformed to marvel and ankle smaller, and the queen kissed the girl and kissed the other ladies of the encourage of the queen, and they held hands and led to the palace, where the 28th was decided her marriage to the king's son, and they began wedding ceremonies that should last 40 days and nights.
And when they had him nailed, combed hair, beautiful hairpins, Diamond big way Erkan. And behold, just stood rooted the ultima pin. The young bride dove suddenly metamorphosed into a small band on the head. And it flew very fast through the window of the palace. Because the pins that her sister had nailed her pins were magical, endowed with the power to transform young women, doves, and invade filled by both sisters had prompted them to ask those pins to a vaster vase. The resolution of the Arabian Nights comes when after 1001 nights, Scheherazade ran out of stories. The king has fallen in love with her and permanently spares her life, making her his queen and thanking Allah for bringing her to him. Scheherazade marries the king because she has a plan that she believes will keep him from continuing to kill his brides after only one night of married life. She tells him a story every night, leaving it on a cliffhanger so that the king will leave her alive another night. And both live between the lights, happy and thriving, and the two poor sisters died of envy and a reconcentration of blood, and Allah gave fans many children as beautiful as their parents. The conflict between punitive man and resourceful woman is one that runs through the whole saga. In the second, more urgently gripping half, we hear the stories of five sisters who have been viciously wronged by men. One has been scared for life for allowing a lecherous shopkeeper to bite her cheek. But what is fascinating in how the woman fight back. When the Caliph admits wrong have been done and tries to pick the woman up with husbands, they say, "We regard men as a deadly disease." And even if not everyone goes that far, you sense that women survive in this world only by living on their wits. In the funniest story, a woman overcomes five grasping would-be lovers by stripping them of their clothes and stocking them in cages as if they were guinea pigs.
Eroticism and sexuality are a major theme and motif within the Arabian Nights. In the frame story, King Shahryar struggles with accepting his wife's sexual desires that lead to her unfaithfulness when he is away during war. The king spends a night with every woman before he kills her, his rage and wrath being channeled into a sexual desire and lustfulness. Additionally, this same theme of lust and sexual drive is present in many of the tales. Aside of these two major themes of the 1001 Nights, the tale from Arabian Nights, the following are the common themes of the story. First is rise to riches. Many of the Arabian Nights stories tell of men who rise from poverty to wealth. the protagonist begins with very little to show for himself, but manages to rise in society both through luck and perseverance. In fact, many of the characters experience good fortune but must capitalize on that good fortune in order to succeed. Next is luck and good fortune. Usually, a character finds success in these stories through some rare stroke of good luck. The power of luck and fate is explored very often because people everywhere love to believe that good fortune can befall anyone. And yet, most of the stories add one twist to the theme. In most of these cases, the characters have to capitalize on the luck in order to succeed. Next is adventure. A common theme of adventure and daring is present throughout nearly all of these stories. Adventure stories such as this will always be appealing to readers, since we often like to imagine our lives as more exciting than they were. What is remarkable about the Arabian Nights is that the stories comment so poignantly on universal human nature, even in the midst of such extraordinary adventures. Next is greed. In a collection of stories that focuses so strongly on wealth and riches, greed naturally arises as a human vice that characters must counter in themselves and others. The antagonists in these tales are almost always evil, and their danger is usually attributed to their greed. Overall, the Arabian Nights values the pursuit of wealth but lays down its fair share of warning along the way. Next is hospitality. In particular, hospitality in these stories suggests an individual's connection to his greater community. For instance, Sinbad the sailor feeds Sinbad the porter every single night as he tells his story, and gives him a large sum of money as he leaves. Further, his stories have an implicitly deductive purpose. He wants to teach the impoverished porter what he has learned about life. Similarly, Sinbad received wonderful hospitality from the many kings he encountered during his journeys. Next is contest and competition. The protagonists of many of these stories take competition very seriously. In most cases, however, a competitive spirits help men to discover their inner strength and thereby prosper. Competition was considered one of the best ways for a man to prove his honor and strength, and this idea is very much reflected in the tales of the Arabian Nights. Last but not the least is the power of storytelling. Storytelling is arguably the collection's most pregnant and lasting theme. In the frame story of the Arabian Nights, Scheherazade believes that the power and intrigue of her stories will be able to keep her husband from killing her or any more of his wives. This sentiment that stories are not only entertaining but powerful, capable of changing people, is reflected throughout the many stories she tells. I think that would be all. Thank you and God bless.